Welcome to InTech, my name's Luke, and today we're going to be covering a data engineering end-to-end project. Now the premise of this is we're going to get some stuff from an SQL on-prem database, put it through a pipeline, automated to run every single day, automatically, in the background, which then updates a Power BI dashboard. Now this project is an adaptation from a YouTuber Mr. K's video, where he has a tutorial essentially doing this exact same project, except he misses out vital components of creating services, resolving common errors, and even adding any business context, like you don't know when you're going to transform things. So the essence of this video is to create a business context to understand why are you doing this? Why would you do this in a company? And if you're going to try and use this to get a job, you really need that. And secondly, is to solve these common errors and issues, because otherwise you're going to turn a 2-hour 45 tutorial, such as Mr. K's, into like 5, 6, 7 hours, which is what I've done. So anyway, let's get straight into it. To start off, we'll look at the business request. Now it says, in this project, your company has recognised the gap in understanding its customer demographics. Specifically, in this project, your company has recognised a gap in understanding its customer demographics, specifically the gender distribution within the customer base and how it might influence product purchases. So here essentially it's saying, we don't know if men or women are buying our stuff. Now with a significant amount of customer data stored on an on-prem SQL database, key stakeholders have requested a comprehensive KPI dashboard. So they have lots of data which you might be able to use to extrapolate male or females, and they want this on a dashboard, which is a KPI dashboard, which is key performance indicators. This dashboard should provide insights into sales by gender and product category, showing total products sold, total sales revenue, there goes the cat, and a clear gender split among customers. Additionally, they need the ability to filter this data by product category and gender, with a user-friendly interface for date-based queries. So they have all this data on-prem, which just means in a computer that they can see at that moment in time, and they want to create a dashboard using that data. They also want to be able to filter it. So on dashboards like Power BI, Tableau, you can put up something like, for instance, it says to filter by category and gender. You could just have like a visualization of sales, and then by gender, and half of it will disappear, and then by product another half will disappear, something like that. And so what is our solution going to be for that? So our solution overview. To address this request, we'll build a robust data pipeline that extracts the on-prem data, loads it into Azure, and performs the necessary transformations to make the data more query-friendly. This transformed data will then feed into a custom-built report that meets all the specified requirements. This pipeline will be scheduled to run automatically every day, ensuring that stakeholders always have access to up-to-date and accurate data. In here, you're performing the necessary transformations to make the data more query-friendly. For instance, changing column names, updating data types, and even creating new tables which are required. So if you have a bunch of unstructured data, in this specific kind of beginner-friendly tutorial, we'll be using structured data, which is pretty much already cleaned and sorted. But if you had a business request where you were having a specific set of tables that maybe you were required, so you'd have to do a before and after schema and then figure out the transformations there automatically. So the whole point in having a data pipeline is that it runs automatically. There's no point in having a pipeline that you have to run yourself all the time. Creating a pipeline is essentially creating a series of steps to get data, in this case, from one place to another. The same way in DevOps pipelines, like code pipelines, you're getting code from one place to another, and you're trying to automate that process to test it. So basically we're just making a data pipeline that does some stuff and makes a dashboard. So let's look at the architecture of this. Now this architecture is kind of, I wouldn't say stolen, but taken directly from Mr. K's. I just thought it's best practice to make it myself instead of just literally screenshotting his. So here you can see we have an on-prem SQL database, which then an Azure Data Factory instance gets the data from that. It ingests it, so this is the ingestion process, and it ingests it into a data lake. Now, an Azure data lake in this instance, we're using a specific type of architecture which has a bronze, silver and gold layer. Bronze is the raw data straight from the on-prem database. Silver has some minor transformations, so maybe data type changes, etc. And then gold is we're trying to change it then to make it more queryable. So you can imagine, thanks Mac. You can imagine that bronze data is just the blank data, just the way that it is, raw data, sorry. Silver, in this instance, we're going to change some of the dates, so some of the dates have seconds and stuff. We're wanting them all to just be day, month, year, or year, month, day, whichever way you want. But we just want the date, we don't want the time as well. And then gold, we're going to change the column names because we want it to be better for when it's pulled out of the Power BI dashboard. You want it to have better column names. To do this, we have Azure Databricks. Now, Azure Databricks is like a notebook platform essentially on Azure. It leverages distributed computing to kind of scalably run these queries and run this code against data and kind of load it in and move it around and stuff. You can imagine it's like Kubernetes with a Jupyter notebook, kind of like that. We're going to use Python in this case. The next thing is Azure Synapse Analytics, and this is used to load the data. So we get the data using Data Factory into the data lake. We transform it using Databricks to move it around in the lake. We then have to load that into a structured format, which we can then use Power BI to query. And Synapse is what we do to load this. And then Power BI is our final kind of destination for the data, which is to then show the user. So that's the pipeline here. And the part which we'll be trying to create to automate is this part here, which we can run using like daily triggers. And then the very end, this you then just refresh the data. You see also we have security and governance. It covers two main parts: Azure Active Directory, which is now known as Entra ID, and key vaults. So for the Data Factory to access the on-prem SQL database, it will require like a username and password. We don't want this in plain text, we want it automated, and so to do that, we add it into key vault, we'll put the password in, and then we'll give that key vault access to the Data Factory, and then it will be able to use that automatically to get the data. Active Directory, we'll be using a variety of kind of security practices within this, which we will go over one at a time as we use them, because it's the best way to really understand it. And then at the very end, we will go into Active Directory to understand the concept behind groups and RBAC a bit more explicitly, because RBAC, which is role-based access control, it's like a heavily required feature when working with the cloud, because essentially you're going to get, instead of individual users, or even with individual users, but you essentially want to group together people who act within a certain role, and you want to have that specific role to have specific levels of access. So for instance, if you had a team of data engineers, this is all they need access to on Azure. Not all of that, but like this, minus Power BI and key vaults added. But you know what I mean? As they have a set specific amount of services to access and a specific level of access for each of those services as well. So like you shouldn't just get access to every single thing in key vault. Maybe just to read instead of to write as well, that kind of thing. So we will cover that at the very end because it's kind of an add-on. We don't really need it for this specific course tutorial project. So anyway, let's start with this. And the easiest place to start is the beginning. So let's start with the on-prem SQL database. So to get started, the first thing we need is a data set. So for our on-prem database, we're going to use this AdventureWorks sample data set, which is provided by Microsoft. Now if we scroll down, it's essentially just sales data, customer data, that kind of thing, standard business data. We have a lightweight data warehouse and OLTP. All we're going to focus on is lightweight. We just want a nice, simple database because the contents of the database and what we're really going to do doesn't really matter that much. The point of this tutorial is more so for you to learn the process of data engineering through pipelining. So we'll just download AdventureWorks LT 2022, and that will download that here. This file is essentially a database. Now we want this database to be running in SQL, and so we need a SQL engine to run it, essentially. And so here, I'll have all these links in the description. If we scroll down, try SQL Server, blah, 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 I'll download a free specialized edition. We're going to want to use Express, which is kind of like a lightweight SQL. And I've accidentally clicked it. But you click that, and it'll open up to here. Just click yes. Basic, and accept. And then go through the steps and download SQL Server. At the end, it'll give you some values you can copy. You don't have to. We don't need them for this here. So that's essentially downloading the engine to run the database. But you want to be able to interact with the database. And so that's where then SSMS comes in. SQL Server Management Studio. SSMS allows you to, as you can see here, configure, monitor, administer instances of SQL servers and databases. We're going to use this as our front end to interact with the database. And so again, there's a download just here. So click download, and that will download it. It's about half a gig, so it could take, a minute or two, depending on your connection. So I'll cancel that because I have it already installed. But I'll show you what is going to install here. So if we just go to SQL Server Management Studio, which is SSMS, and we open that up, we don't have to open up the engine. Once we've installed it, it's kind of running. And so it's running a server, a SQL server. So if we go here, you can see server type, database engine, that's fine. Name, if you click here, this SQL Express, that is the engine that's running. That's what we had just downloaded. If you had multiple servers running, you could use them, but this is the only one we've got. Click connect. Cool, and we have that there. So now we have the engine running, essentially. We have the UI to interact with it. And we have the database, but he's kind of like somewhere random. He's in downloads. We want to move that database to the backups within SQL. So if you open up File Explorer, then open up two, and one of them will go to C drive, Program Files, Microsoft SQL Server, and we'll just go to this one. I've installed it twice, that's why it's appearing twice. And then MS SQL, and then you can see backup. Open that up, and you can plop it in here. So just drag and drop it into this part here. And so then that's it now, essentially, within the SQL kind of environment. So within databases, you'll have nothing here. If you click on databases and then right click, your temptation will be new, but you're not making a new database. You're actually restoring one based on the file you've got. So we actually click restore database, and then we'll click on source device, go to the three dots to browse, click add, and then here, if you're not in this location, you can navigate through here, or you can paste that in. So if you go into here, you could click there, then Control C, and then you could paste that in to get here. And you just click on one, so LT 2022, click OK, click OK, click OK, and then it'll load it up. For mine, it'll, oh, well, there you go. Restored successfully. So perfect. So then you can see it now, it'll appear here. If we open it up, we can then see that there are a variety of tables within this database. Now this is the part we're more concerned about. If we go in here, you can see we could, select the top 1000 rows, for instance. And there you go, we can see the data. And to do that, you just click on one of the tables, right click, select top 1000 rows. From here, you can edit this query to, do whatever it is that you want it to do. For example, there you go. Or something like this. And it changes the column name. So anyway, we now have the SQL on-prem server running. Now Data Factory, we want Data Factory to be able to interact with the SQL server, and for that we'll make a username and password, but we'll cover that in the ingestion part of this. For now we're just setting everything up. So if we go back to the architecture, that's set up, we have it running. If we go to Azure Data Factory now, which is what we're wanting, first we want to open up Microsoft Azure, which is just portal.azure.com, and then you want to sign up. Once you've signed up, a great bonus that they do, and I'll show you by using a different email and password. I don't know my password for the spare account. But up here on the top right, good timing, you can see credits remaining. So when you first sign up to Azure, on the top here where it says Azure Services, there'll be a big square and it will say something like free trial, $200 free credit, 60 days trial or something. And so you get $200 credit, which is like £155, something like that, because I'm in the UK. And so for this, I've had it running for 2 or 3 days, variety of different services, and only use £6. But the thing is, you don't have to worry about it. You just, you have a free £150. So make sure you do that, and then now you don't have to worry for the next however long. You can follow tutorials and stuff. So once we have Azure up and running, logged in, what we want to do is create a resource group. So you can see here it says resource group. If it doesn't appear there for you, you can just search it in here. So you can search resource group. And I've got a couple here. Now, a resource group in Azure is a group of resources. It's just a logical container which you can imagine holds a variety of resources. Now, the reason you want this is because it logically groups them together. So for instance here, we'll create a new resource group, and within that we will hold the Data Factory, the Data Lake, Databricks, and Synapse, and the Key Vault. They will all be within it, which means that as soon as we're done, we can just delete that entire resource group and everything's gone. But if we ever want to find something, we can just go into that resource group. Saves having to faff around with tags and stuff. It's a really good feature in Azure. So if we click create, first thing comes up as a subscription. A subscription again is like another container. It's one layer up from resource groups, you can imagine it. They consolidate billing, that kind of thing. So you would have like one subscription, say for a dev environment, one for QA, one for prod, something like that. If you don't know what that is, it's essentially just different environments for development. So you would have dev, which is where you would do your development, QA or testing, where you would test things, and production is where you would actually put them out into the world. And it means you can then manipulate things differently and have different billings. So you could have an app, you're developing it, messing around with it, then you're testing it, then you're production. And that's always constantly moving. There's always things moving from one to another. So we'll just name this resource group Intech-RG, and for region we'll just go closest to us, which UK. We'll just go UK South since that's recommended. Next, tags, don't need any tags, we're all good. Review and create, and you can see it's passed the validation, so we can just create this resource group, and it'll happen just instantaneously because it's just a logical grouping. So let's go to the resource group, we'll click create. And so within this resource group now we want to create the resources. Now we're in the marketplace, we can click Azure Services Only, which means that we don't see now stuff that's on the general marketplace. We only see things which are Azure Services. Now you can already see it's here, but if you didn't see that, you can just search DataFac, that should find it, Data Factory. And so if we click create, then one option, Data Factory, and that will open up this page. Again, subscription, resource group, instance name, we'll just call it Intech-DA for Data Factory. Region, again, we'll just go closest to us. And then version, just leave that as is. Configure get later if we want it. Networking, it's all good. Nothing here we need to change. And then that should work. We'll recreate this, and you can see it's deployment in progress. And again, it takes you to this screen. So this is the screen you come to whenever you deploy a service, and that was rapid. So there you go. I was going to say, you can see here the subscription in the resource group. But go to resource, and then this here is the Data Factory. So we'll launch that studio when we come to that. But now we have made the Data Factory. Now we want to make the Azure Data Lake. So if we go back here and search Data Lake, you see it doesn't come up. There's a Data Lake Storage Gen 1, but we don't want to use, we want to use the most recent one. There's an Analytics, but here it says Storage Accounts, Azure Data Lake, Data Lake, Data Lake Gen 2. So if we click that, we can see here that this isn't a data lake as far as we can see. But what is a data lake? Well, I'll get up a good definition for you, so don't butcher it. It's a centralized repository designed to store, process, and secure large amounts of structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. So you can imagine it's just a kind of logical grouping of data. It's just data. For instance, a data warehouse is where you can keep structured data, where everything's in order. Whereas a lake, it's like water. It's just kind of flowing around, all different types. So a storage account here is one centralized place for kind of all of your storage needs in Azure. And so if we click create, I'll show you in a minute, but you get a variety of things in it. You can make containers, file shares, queues, tables, all different things. As you can see here, yeah, contains all your Azure storage data objects, blobs, files, queues, and tables. So here, subscription, same one. Resource group, make sure it goes to the right one, Intech RG. Storage account name, we'll just call it Intech-SG. No dashes, remove the dash. UK South, that's cool, blah blah blah, that's all good. Next. Now here, you may clock it, hierarchical namespace. So hierarchical namespace, complemented by Data Lake Storage Gen 2 endpoint, enables file and directory semantics, accelerates big data analytics workloads, and enables access control lists. Checking this box essentially turns your storage account into a storage account with data lake capabilities, i.e. turns it into a data lake. So from that, we'll just click review and create, and that will just skip all of this because we don't need to touch that. Straight to the end. Click create. And then that will be creating this deployment. Now, what I was going to show you last time, but it was too fast, is whilst this is going on, the subscription and resource group, we can just go to the resource group here and just move on to the next bit. And up the top, you can see there's that notification. We can just let that run in the background whilst we create the next thing. And so the next thing is an Azure Databricks instance. So if we go to create again, this time we'll write in Databricks. Now you can see it's popped up, deployment succeeded, so that's good. First one, Azure Databricks, create Azure Databricks. And again, same stuff, subscription, resource group. Now, workspace name, because it's going to be a Databricks workspace, which is exactly, again, what it sounds like. It is a space for work, which is honestly one thing that I do like about Azure, is that their names are not messing around like, you know, with AWS. It's a bit kind of, who knows what they're talking about sometimes. So for this one, we'll call it Databricks, or we'll call it Intech-Databricks. There we go. And we'll just leave the rest of it as is. Next, 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 next. And review and create. And it's validating, successful. We'll create that. Perfect. And then again, just go back to the resource group whilst that goes on. And then the next thing we need now is the Azure Synapse Analytics. So again, we'll click create. We'll just write Synapse. Synapse Analytics, create, create. Same thing again, where do you want it? I want it in this subscription, I want it in that resource group. Workspace name, because Synapse is similar to Databricks, as it creates a workspace for you, so it's a space for all your work. So you can have multiple workspaces. The workspace name for this, we will call it Intech-Synapse. Region, UK again, South. Now this time, you see it says select Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Now the reason that it says this is because if you recall from this diagram, Synapse loads the data from the data lake to make it structured enough for Power BI. It kind of loads it into a format structured enough for then Power BI to run the queries against. So it knows to expect a data lake, essentially. So here we'll go account name, and it's saying which subscription. We're going to go with a normal one. File system name, no available items. So if we see here, what we're wanting to do is create a new one. And we'll call this one Synapse-FS for file system. Click OK. Now this file system is because Synapse, as a workspace, it has its own files that it uses. It has logs, data, outputs, things like that. And so now you're saying, within this data lake, here you go, have your own little file system. You can use your files and stuff as you need in there. And I'll assign myself the storage blob data contributor role on data lake to interactively query it in the workspace. So basically to give permissions for Synapse and data lake. If we go next, security, that's fine there. These are kind of things that are worth consideration, but out of the scope of this particular project. Review and create, and then we should create this. It says $5, don't be alarmed. That's per terabyte. So you're not going to spend $5, don't worry. And if you do, it's the free trial, so all good. Now if we go back to the resource group, we now have all of this created, except you'll be thinking, look, what about bronze, silver and gold? Well, if we go into the storage account back here, on the left hand side you'll see what I was talking about, data storage, containers, file shares, queues and tables. So if we first click on containers, you can see here that the file system has created itself and there's an automatic logs container. Now we want to create a bronze, silver and gold container or containers. So we just click plus up in container and then just do bronze and click create, and then silver, click create, and then the same for gold. Click create. There we go. Cool. And so these are just containers for the information to go in, hence the shape of this and the architectural diagram. Comes in here, goes in that container, stuff happens, push it there, and we use Databricks to move it from one container to the next. So Databricks gets this, mounts the data lake, gets here, transforms it, pushes it in there. So now we have AD in key vaults. We'll come back to AD. We'll do it like a little bit as we go on, but we'll come back to it formally at the very end. So really we're just going to create key vault now. So if we go back to the resource group and create, let's see how's this getting on. You can see that this is still going on. If you click on it, it will end up taking you to it here, as you can see. So it's still just creating the Synapse workspace. If we go back, we're back here again. So go key vault. Spelled it wrong, but that's all good. It will still find it. We're creating a key vault. Same subscription as normal. And now you'll see here, there's a couple other things. We have a Synapse workspace and the Databricks one. We actually have two Databricks ones, but one was from a previous project. What's happening here is Databricks and Synapse, they both are their own kind of contained system, not just a service. And for this, they require their own resource group. So they make that themselves, they manage that themselves so that they can do the stuff they need to do. However, do make sure that at the end, if you've deleted everything straight from the resource group, the Databricks one will still linger. So you need to go and kill that yourself at the end. Nice way of putting it. So, intech, key vault name, we'll just call this intech dash key vault. Oh, it's in use from my previous one. So we'll just intech dash key vault. We'll just do the whole word. Here we're going to go UK South, standard pricing, that's fine. Nothing we need to do here, just review and create. And you click this bell, it'll go away. And then create. And then back to the resource group. Now that is deploying. So that's all of this done except now Power BI. So to get Power BI to work, you essentially you need a Windows machine. Now you could do this on Linux or on Mac if you virtualize a Windows machine, which essentially means you run a program which then runs Windows in it to kind of pretend that you're Windows inside your own computer. You kind of get some of your computer's resources and say, go and make a Windows for me. But these services you need to pay for. I'll show you, there are a couple. Parallels is one that I've heard people using successfully, and UTM. VirtualBox is also another common one. So if you want to do that, you can do that. You can't do it running a virtual machine in Azure or in AWS because you need a Windows license key to run it. So I would suggest just straight from the Windows if you can. If you can't, honestly, no big deal. There's two possible solutions. One is you can use Tableau instead, which is like Power BI's portable cousin. And you can also just honestly don't have to do it, really. There we go, that's what I'm trying to find. You don't have to do the dashboard because the dashboard is kind of just a way, A, to show that you understand the full process beginning to end, but also B, it just gives a tangible output to everything you've done here, which is always quite nice. But often for people, especially people who are engineers, this front bit probably least favourite, so it's no biggie if you're missing out on it. What have I done there? There we go. So to get Power BI anyway, you have to have a work or school account. However, there is a workaround for this. Don't worry, don't need to buy it. There is a thing here, try free for 1 month. Now, if you don't have a work or school email, it can be frustrating because you can't sign up to Power BI. However, if you come here to Microsoft 365, this link, I'll add it in the description. You can try free for 1 month. We'll just use $4.91 because if it does auto renew, then fair enough. But also, it's the cheapest one. But also, if you contact Microsoft, they're really good at refunding it. So anyway, if you follow through this here, you'll have to, I think, confirm your email. You definitely have to confirm your mobile number. But you will get to a point where then it asks you to create your own email address. And so you could do like look@intech, and then it adds a end something like .on.microsoft.com. And this is a work email. Now you can then straight after that cancel this trial, but it keeps the work email. And you can then use that as a works email to sign up to Power BI. I'll put a link in the description of a video that I found to do that, so you can go check that out. Now, once you have that done, you could get Power BI, download it from Microsoft online, so on your browser. But the problem with that is the package you're installing it is a one-time thing, so you don't know if you need an update, basically. You have to go and find it yourself. Whereas the good thing about the Microsoft Store is that the Microsoft Store will automatically at least tell you need an update, or you can go on it to check. It's like a package manager essentially with a UI. So here I've installed it, but you just install it yourself, and then once it's done, you can, once it loads, sign in, and then it'll just bring you to a boring old front cover bit which says create report, blah blah blah. We'll show you when it loads up. There we go. And this is kind of the splash screen, if you will, for it. And you can see here I'm logged in with this .onmicrosoft.com. That's it. So that is the entire setup to get each individual service running. In the next episode we will cover ingestion, in which we will set up the Azure Data Factory using key vaults for security to get the information from SQL Database and put it into Azure Data Lake. So the first thing we need to do now that we have everything set up is we need to link the Data Factory to our on-prem SQL database. So if we go to the Data Factory and launch the Studio, this will essentially launch our workspace. I can show you that UI in a minute. But first, before we dive into here, let's open back up SQL Server Management Studio, and we'll just connect, so that's all good. Something to be aware of here, if you've done the same as me, which is do one bit one day and come back the next, you can open up SQL Server Configuration Manager, and when we open that up here, it'll be this. My son's sleeping next door. He's just a baby. We have our SQL Server here, and you can see it's running. It can sometimes stop, and if it stops, you can just click here to start the service. So we'll come back here, open our databases, and we have these. We'll go to AdventureWorks, we'll open that up, and as we've seen before, the tables, we can just click on one, right click, select, and now we have a query for this table. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a user. So we're going to create a user with a username and password. We're going to store that password into Key Vault, and Data Factory is going to use Key Vault to get the password to access this SQL database to pull the data up. So here we have the create login query, which is create a login called look with this password 123456789, and then create that user for the login. So if we ensure we're clicked on the correct one here, we have the SQL open, and up here we can click execute, and that will run that there. And here it says look already exists. I must have already made them yesterday. We'll call them look2, run execute, and there we go. Commands completed successfully. That will have created this login. If we now go back here to the portal, we've got Data Factory. Up the top, let's search for Key Vault. We'll pop that up. We have our Key Vault, Intech Key Vault. Click in here. Objects, and then keys and secrets. So we want secrets because a key is like, generating an actual key with all this good stuff. We want a secret. So we want to generate our import, but if you notice there, this isn't going to work. So I'll show you. If we do username, is look2, we'll just get an instant error. Now the operation is not allowed by RBAC, which is what we were talking about in the previous episode. Role-based access control. So essentially you want to create a role here that has the ability to create keys, and we want to assign it to yourself. So we'll go to IAM, role assignments. There we go, and we can see this is here. I think this is lingering from our previous time when I've done this. So if you click add role assignment, and here we're going to just write in admin, and you can see Key Vault admin. So from blah blah blah, so it lets you do stuff. Click on that, then we'll click next. Now there's members, user, group, or service principal. We are a user. A managed identity would be like a service within Azure. So user, select members, and then you'll pop up. You just select yourself, click select. If you are in a company, there could be loads of users come up there. There could be a variety of groups and service principals. But we have us with that there. Let's review and assign. Review and assign. And then that should be used straight away. Sometimes this kind of duplication thing occurs when it pops out. If you refresh up the top, you see it will go away. So if we go back to objects, secrets, so the secret within our vault, you see that RBAC error no longer exists. And that's because we now have the capability to create secrets. So click create, pop it in here. So we'll write username and then look2, create. You can see it's created that, and then the same again with password. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. There we go. Apparently that password's been found in the Databricks before, which not surprised. So there we go. We now have access. We have made the password. So now let's jump back over to Azure Data Factory. Now from here we want to create a new something, right? That's kind of main thing that pops up is you get a new pipeline, query, data flow, data set. The one which we're concerned about is pipeline. So you can see here within Data Factory you can ingest, orchestrate, transform, and configure some stuff. On the left we've got this panel of icons. If we click expand, home, author, monitor, manage, and learning center. So author is where we can make the things which come up from new. So we've seen it there, pipeline, query, flow, data set. And author, you've got that stuff there. We have a monitor part. You can run a pipeline. That's where you can see, you can monitor the pipeline, and then you can trigger it, etc. A variety of other things. Manage, where you manage linked services, which is essentially a way to link services together, so give them access to one another. And a variety of other things, which I'm not concerned about here. And then also Learning Center, so where you can get some more tutorials if you want to go deeper into Data Factory. But for us, we'll go to author, go to pipeline, and we'll see there's nothing there. We'll click plus, and you see pipeline, and then pipeline. So this is what I was saying, you can create data sets, data flow, blah, blah, blah. We're on a pipeline. From here, We'll rename this pipeline. We'll just call it copy. Oh, I've not clicked on it. Call it, what have I done? Copy data. So here within this pipeline, you'll see down the left, we have things called activities. Now these are just activities that the pipeline will do, things that it will do. And so you can see there's a variety of things like a Power Query, some machine learning jobs, iteration stuff, so like ForEach. And then if we come up, we can get to things like move and transform as copy data, data flow, and there's a bunch of other stuff, Azure functions, Data Explorer, Synapse notebooks, etc. Because quite a lot of this stuff like Data Factory and Synapse, I'm sure Synapse is built on top of Data Factory, but we'll come to that later. We can see that. So the first thing we do is we create a new copy data activity, and we'll name this just copy data. We'll just remove the one, and that's fine. So you see here that there's a one above source and one above sync. That's saying something needs to be done here. So if we click on source, we can see there's an asterisk here, which is saying a source dataset must be selected. Source is the source of your data. So in our example, it's a SQL database. So that's the source. And the sync is where we want it to go, which is the data lake. Source and sync. So we'll have to set these up. So we'll click on new source dataset. And within here, you want to search for SQL or SQL. And you see down here SQL Server. The rest of them are a bunch of other things, so different types of SQL servers, and then a bunch of Azure and an Amazon one. We are doing SQL since it's on-prem. Click continue. And we'll name this SQL Server on-prem. So as I had just shown you and briefly talked about, we have linked service coming up now. So on linked service, we want to create a new linked service. And now this is what we're going to use to connect to any other data source. So we'll call it SQL Server on-prem. And then we'll just write linked service afterwards. So the next thing of note here is description. Put in whatever you want if you want a description. You don't particularly need one. But connect via integration runtime. We have here auto-resolve integration runtime. This is what we would select if we had services from Azure that we were connecting to. But we actually are connecting to an on-prem database, not one which is already in Azure. So you have to create a different integration runtime. And you can see here, what is the network environment? Is it Azure? Is it self-hosted? Linked self-hosted. And for our example here, we're doing self-hosted. So if we click that, because as you can see, it's on-prem, click continue. And now it's saying, what do you want to name it? And so we'll name it self-hosted integration runtime. SHIR, so self-hosted integration runtime. Click create. And now this pops up, which is saying how we're going to set it up. Because normally when it has that auto-resolve, they just link to each other. Whereas here, I'm saying, right, I want to link somewhere. So it's like, right, you need to now install something on your computer so that I can recognize where you are, essentially. And so we have Express or manual. In our instance, we'll just do Express. So click here to launch the Express setup for the computer. And it will download a program here. If we open this up and downloads, double click, and we'll run this. So when that's done, which can take like honestly a good 5 minutes depending on your internet connection, we can then click apply. And there we go, we'll see the big green tick for there. If you're wondering, mine had an error because I already had this installed and had to uninstall it, which again takes ages. So version recommended, that's fine. Now we want to fill in the server name and database name details. If we come here to SSMS, up the top you'll see desktop blah blah blah, right? If we go to properties, see the name in there, can copy that. So that's the server name. So then if we go back to the portal, paste that in as server name. The database name, if we go back again to SSMS, where am I going? Database name is AdventureWorks LT 2022. So if we click on that, then click again, we can Control C to get the name, paste that in here, Control V. And we'll use SQL authentication, so that's using the username and password that we had just mentioned. So for the username, we'll put in look2, and for the password, we could put in the password, right? But we don't want it in plain text. We want to leverage the security features which Azure provide, or which they offer. So we click on Key Vault, and then the AVK linked service, we have to make one here. So click New, Subscription, Azure Vault is our vault, System Assigned Managed Identity, and that's fine, it's linked service. Click Create, and this will link the service of the Key Vault to the Data Factory. Now, you'll see here that it doesn't load anything up. Now this is where the Active Directory stuff comes in. So if we go back to our Key Vault here, and we go back to IAM, Role Assignments, and we want to, let's refresh, we want to add a new role assignment. Now for this one, we want a Vault user, so Key Vault Secrets user, and click Next. And for this here, we're gonna use Managed Identity. If we click Select Members, we can then see here Subscription, just the same one as normal. Managed Identity, we have Synapse, Data Factory, a couple other things. So for this one, it's Data Factory, and then you can see our Data Factory pops up. So click on that, click Select. Basically, the linked service has now said, from the Data Factory's point of view, that we can go to get stuff from Key Vault. But now we have to go to Key Vault and say, by the way, this guy, he's going to come, this is his role. So we'll click Select, Review and Assign, Review and Assign, and then it'll add that role assignment. When it does, you'll see it in here. Again, in duplication, we'll refresh, looks good. If we go back to the Data Factory now, we can click the refresh button next to secret name. You'll see the error goes away, click drop down, and username and password pop up. So we can click on password, leave it as the latest version, leave all the other stuff as is, click create, and there we go. That SQL Server on-prem linked service will be created when publishing. So now it's saying what table name of which to join. Now we'll refresh that, you can see it's not going to work. There you go, it says can't connect to SQL database. Now, to resolve this, let's go back to the SSMS here. We can close down this properties window. We then right click the server that we're working on. We go to properties. We go to security on this side here. And under server authentication, there'll be Windows and SQL Server and Windows. So you will automatically be on Windows. You have to click SQL Server and Windows so that this username and password can now work. So if we have that assigned, you might have to shut this down and open it back up for it to work. If we go back to the portal, I'll see. So I've just realised I'm trying to debug my own tutorial. I can't find the table name, it's not working, it won't connect. Now this not connecting, it is partly to do with that SSMS, you do have to make that change. But additionally, here we can see it's just not working, it's saying it could be database firewall. What it is it's trying to use HTTPS. So if we go to Azure Key Vault again, because I was trying with the password to see if that was the problem, if the password was wrong, because you can't see it in Key Vault, just tells you it exists. Part of the security measures. But under encrypt you can see it says mandatory. You want that to become optional. So as you can see here, its value indicates whether TLS encryption is required, so that's HTTPS. If we now click save, or what we can actually do first is test connection. That means we shouldn't get errors on the next page because of this. So connection successful, showing that this will work. If we put that to mandatory, test connection, failed. So that was the problem. Optional, test connection, save. So now we can see that the table name doesn't have an error, but doesn't have any tables. But if we go back to SSMS, you can see there are a bunch of tables. And the reason for this is we have to grant look-to access to these tables. And so to do that, we'll just rewrite in here, so change this query to say use AdventureWorks 2022 semicolon, we'll do grant select on, and we'll do sales LT dot address to look to. I'm not normally this bad at typing, I'm trying to be quiet because otherwise it makes a racket in the mic. So if we go now to here, click on that, execute, commands completed successfully. I've come back to portal now, refresh the tables, we should see sales LT address pop up. So click on that, click OK. And now the source has been selected. So in here we have the SQL database. Next up, we want the sync. So where's it going to go? Obviously, we have within this data set here, we have what we just created, but we don't want that. We want a new data set for the sync. So for this, if we search data lake, just data will come up, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, click on that, click continue, and now in here, we'll click Parquet, which is a column-based format optimized for querying. We'll click continue and we'll just leave it as Parquet sync. Again, we need to create a new linked service from the data factory to the data lake storage. So we'll just write linked service at the end. Now here we can do auto resolve integration runtime, since this is another service within Azure. Authentication type we can leave as is. Account selection, our subscription, and then our storage account, and then test the linked service, test connection, successful, and create. And there we go. So now you can see it's popped up file path. So this is saying where within that data lake do you want it to go. And this is where the enabling hierarchical naming system comes in, which is what we've done to enable the storage account as a data lake. So we'll click on browse. And here you can see it's everything we have within or all the containers we have within the data lake. So we'll click bronze because that's where I want it to go. Click OK. So it's going to go to bronze. No other secondary directory. And the file name, we can just leave that. Click OK. And now what we can do is we'll grab this. And you can see there's a couple of different buttons. We have validate, so we can validate the debug, add the trigger. We're going to debug first. So this is basically saying, you know, is anything going to go wrong with it? But it also automatically runs it. So we can see here it's queued, it's in progress. And so after about a minute or so, here 44 seconds, we can see that it has succeeded. Now you can see there's a couple of different icons here. So this one, details, gives you some details surrounding it if you're interested in that, but we don't need to know that for this moment in time. And then we have these two icons, which is input and output. So if we click on input, you can see that this is, you know, what's coming in to the pipeline activity. And output is what's coming out of it. Now this is particularly important for if we're going to do, say for instance, a ForEach. If this copy data was copying the names of tables, for instance, you can then get it from this JSON object. But anyway, it says it's copied the data, so let's go to the storage account and we'll have a look. So if we click on storage accounts, go to Intech, and data storage, containers, we'll go to bronze, and voila, just like that, you now have sales LT address Parquet. You can download it. You won't be able to open it unless you have something that can open it. But that's it now here. So what we'll do is we'll actually delete this now because we don't need it. But at least we now have proof of concept that we can get data from the SQL table or SQL database into Azure, into the data lake. So delete that because we don't need it, because the next stage is we're going to update this such that it goes through every table, and then we can bring all the tables directly into that bronze bucket. So what we're going to do next, we're going to create a new pipeline because that's, I suppose, easier for demonstration purposes instead of modifying the existing one. So if we do copy all tables, what we can do is we can just delete that other one, because it won't delete all of the stuff that we made, it would just delete the pipeline itself. And so the first thing we need to do here is we need to get a list of all the tables, because we want to iteratively run that copy data activity for each table. So the first thing we do is, as you'll maybe recall, there's an iterator for each, right? And so that's what we use to do the for each. But first, before that, we need to find the names of the tables. And we want to do this automatically. So if more tables are added, then when this pipeline's run, it updates them and brings them in. So the first thing we're going to do is create a lookup activity. Now this activity is going to look up as it suggests. In the source data set, we're going to do SQL Server On-Prem, and then we're going to click Open. And under Table here, you can see there's a table selected. We want to click Clear because we don't want any specific table selected, because we want it to iterate through it. So go back to here now, and use query, we want to click Query here, and we'll uncheck first row only. Now within this query, we're going to run a query which is going to get back all the tables within our database. So that query is, so let's expand this so we can see it. So essentially it's selecting the schema name and table name from the tables and schemas where the name is sales LT. Now why sales LT? If we go back to SSMS here, you can see sales LT is the schema here and address is the table name. So for schema sales LT we have address table. For schema sales LT we have product table. And so what we can do now is if we click on that lookup, we can go up to debug, and as we had just seen, this will run it, and there we go. After just 12 seconds it succeeded, and we can see again input output. Input we don't really care about because it succeeded. Output, you can see here, sales LT address, that's the only one that's brought back. But you can see now how powerful this lookup tool is, because it's come back and said under schema I can see address. Now why is it only brought back one? Well, now if we go back to SSMS, we can see that on AdventureWorks LT we've granted select access only on sales LT address to look to. Now if we change this to star and run execute, right, so we've just chatted to our trusty pal ChatGPT, because I forgot you can't wildcard in that. And so we're going to grant select on schema. We'll do sales LT to me. So every table in that schema we will now have access. And so if we, whoa, we didn't mean that one. Well done. If we now execute this, that's complete. And we go back here, we can click on lookup and we'll debug again. And this time, as you can see, succeeded in 13 seconds. And if we check our output, there are 10 values now. Customer address, blah, 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 blah. And that's because, let's count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that means all 10 tables we have access to, which means it's getting the details for all 10 tables in here. So we now have the tables, let's copy them over. So in activities, let's just write for each, and we'll get that for each here. And now we're going to drag, as you can see here, there's a few things. This on skip, on success, on fail, on completion. Now if this is successful, this lookup, we then want the for each to work, and so we'll do that green arrow to the next one, so on success. And now within this for each loop, you have activities. And so if we click on edit there, this will open up the same type of UI, except now we're within the for each. And so within the for each, we're wanting to copy data. So for the source data set, we want to use the same as last time, SQL Server On-Prem. However, for the query, we don't want the table, we want to actually use a query. And for this query, you can see there's an add dynamic content part, and this is what we want to add, because every for each loop, we want a different table name to be copied over. I'm going to write this expression which says concatenate select from schema.table name. And so as you had seen from that JSON, we get the schema name, sales LT, and the table name, address, and this just select from, and it concatenates them together with a dot between them. So it creates that query dynamically. And we'll click OK. And so that's creating that query, which is all good. So for the sync, we're going to use Parquet, just the same one as we made before, except we'll click on open because we want to modify it. Now, we want to modify it because we want to change this file path directory to be bronze as the top layer, so that's bronze container that's going to hold like any bronze data that you want to print out of this lake. Under that, we want to define the schema one, so it's sales LT, so bronze sales LT. Then within the sales LT schema, it's going to be the name of the table, so address for instance, and then we want the file name to be address.parquet, so that's the structure that we're after. So to get the schema name and table name, as you'll recall from the first part, source, we can concatenate together within this query. So that will be a good way for us to get the two layers. But also we can get item.schema name and item.table name. Now it's slightly different though for a sync, because within the sync, I want to open it back up, we'll go to parameters, and we want to actually create parameters, which we then pull the value in with. So if we do schema name as one parameter, and the next parameter we can do table name. Now if we go back to the pipeline here, you'll see we now have these parameters which get utilized for the sync dataset. Now the value of these parameters, we want to add dynamic content, and this here is where we can add in the item dot schema name. We'll copy that, click OK, and for the table name we'll do the same, except we will write in table name. Click OK, and this way we're able to pull those values through. Now if we go back to open, we want to go to connection, we want to update this file path. So for the directory, we'll do add dynamic content, and we're going to update this to concatenate. So at, and then curly braces, concat, so that's the concatenate function, and we're going to add in dataset dot schema name more. Don't forget the open close brackets. Then I want to add in a / and dataset dot table name. Now dataset here instead of item is because the parameters from the front part, so from the source, they come in as new parameters to the second part, which is sync. And then to get the sync parameters and pull them into here, we have to use dataset. And so if we click OK, that'll concatenate that together. Then if we go to file name, this is where we can then, again, we'll concat and curly braces, open that up, and within here we're going to concatenate together table name, so dataset dot table name and dot parquet to assign the file type. And we'll click OK, and now this will dynamically work for every single one. So now if we come out to the pipeline view, we have the for each activity which copies data, and it's on success of this that the activity runs, but it doesn't say here's the data, so like the item.schema name and item.table name that we require. So we have to explicitly tell the for each which items to loop through. So if we click right in the middle here, that pipeline. And we can see the bottom, we can go to output. We have one here called lookup, which we had run. And there was an in and output. In the output, you can see there is a value item within that JSON object. Now, this is the item we want to reference, because otherwise, if we just said ForEach, how would it know what to ForEach through? So on the ForEach, we click on that activity, then go to items. Now, I'd previously done this incorrectly. It's not values, it's value. That's why there was a red in the outputs. So if we leave that as .value and click OK, now we have set up to say, on the activity lookup1, that output get .value of that JSON object. So let's click on lookup and we'll click debug, and that should run the whole pipeline. Failure happened on source side. Incorrect syntax from sales LT, so we're missing a space. Let's go SQL Server On-Prem. I think, could it be on one of the dynamic parts of this activity? So if we click edit, we'll open up this activity, we'll go to source. Yes, and so here it says select star from, and there's no space because it's literally just concatenating the strings. You have to add the space in, so I'll add the space, click OK. Go back to copy all tables. Now here, so that we can actually monitor it within monitor, let's publish all, which essentially saves it. So if we click publish, that will save and publish everything. And then once those changes are deployed, we will add, there we go, we'll add trigger, and we'll do trigger now, which will just run it right now. Trigger, this is where at the very end I'll show you how we can automate the entire end-to-end process with a new trigger which runs, say, daily or something, or when the SQL database on-prem is updated. But in this instance, let's just trigger it now, click OK, and that will trigger the pipeline. So now we can see this pipeline within monitor. So you can see that that's popped up here by manual trigger. That would say scheduled triggered if it was like scheduled, for instance. And it's in progress. You can always click this refresh button up top to see how it's getting on. If we click on the name, we can then see everything that's happening. So these are all the copy datas which are running concurrently. You can refresh to see how they're getting on, so which ones are in progress, which are queued, for instance. Right, another error. So we have a couple succeeded. Let's preview this here. Output succeeded, so it's not going to say anything bad. This one's failed. Let's see why. Sync side. A lease ID was specified. Interesting error. Let's refresh and see what's happening here. So what we can do anyway here is we can go back to our storage account and we'll refresh this and we'll go into bronze and we'll see what's there. So interestingly, we can see item.schema name, table name, and then that's it. So it's not pulling through the dynamic values. So we'll go back to home, author, pipelines, we'll go to ForEach activity. So we'll triple check everything here. So it's definitely, it should be activity lookup1 output.value. That should be fine. Let's edit the copy data activity. Source, select from all, that should be all good. So yeah, that's fine. On the sync side, let's see here, because I don't know if this is actually what dynamically. So, is that what it is? Yes. So there was no @ symbol. So there we go. Okay. And then we go back. OK. And that should work now. So we'll publish all there. Publish. Go back to the main pipeline. and run there. So what's happening is it requires that, we'll trigger it now, it requires that @ symbol for the dynamic content. So if we go back to monitor, we can then monitor the pipeline again, click refresh, copy all tables, we can see that it's here. And copy data 1, they're all coming up. And as you can see, a couple of them are in progress. Now what we can do now is if we go back to bronze, and we go back to the top layer here, and there you go, sales LT, so you can see it's working now. And you can see what it's doing, it's creating these folders. And then there's the folders here, let's click on one, you can see address.parquet, so it's pulled it over. If we go back out, refresh, more will start coming up as this works. Let's refresh this, and as you can see it's all working away. And there you go, you can see that they're all there. If we go back here and refresh, we can just see it's ran successfully. We can now see that what we have created is a pipeline which looks up, which accesses a SQL database using a username and password, an on-prem one, gets back a list of table names, and then copies the data of those table names, or copies the data of those tables into an Azure data lake here. So there we go, that's the first stage done, which is the ingestion process. So we now have completed this part here until bronze. In today's video, we're going to be covering Databricks for transformation from the bronze into the silver, and from the silver into the gold. So let's get started. First things first, we'll come here to our Azure portal and we'll open up Intake Databricks. Let's get that, as we've talked about kind of ad nauseum here. Go to resource groups and tech, and within here we'll have our Databricks workspace. So here, launch workspace, kind of similar to Data Factory. You have to launch it, and it will use Microsoft Entra ID to sign you in using your email. And apparently I don't have access to my own Databricks. That's interesting. Let me try it again. There we go. Just had to refresh it, apparently. So we're in. Now, on the left, there's a bunch of stuff. Don't really worry about it. All we have to think about, and not worry about, all we're going to do is leverage workspaces. So, and also compute. But workspace is, as I said before, a space for your work, for your notebooks. Now compute, which is the other thing we're kind of going to become aware of, is where you can create the compute, which is the underlying compute infrastructure to run your notebooks. Now why do you need this if it's just a notebook? Well, you're doing an ETL here, or an ELT, whichever it is you're using Databricks for. In our scenario here, we're doing an ETL, so we're extracting the data, transforming it, then loading it, extracting it using Data Factory, transforming it in Databricks, loading it with Synapse. So we need a cluster here to process the information, because although our database is quite small, in the real world this could be petabytes of data, which is a lot of data. So first things first, let's create this cluster. So first things first, the name, we'll change that to just Intake cluster. This is fine, this is fine. Access mode, single user, since it's only us, so we're not sharing it, just us. The Databricks runtime version, we're going to use that, just the default one, that's fine. As you can see here, you get standard ones as well as machine learning ones. So as you can see, it's using GPU. We don't need that, that's all good. The worker type is where we're selecting the compute resources we want for the worker. Now you get different types here: general purpose, delta cache accelerated, general purpose, blah blah blah, optimized. We just want to go for a normal general purpose, kind of lowest we can get, which is 14.4. We'll click on that, that will do. Now here, terminate after 120 minutes of inactivity. we'll bring that down to 30. So this is to say that if you don't use this compute in 30 minutes, it will just kill it. But then you'll have to wait for it to load up. The reason I'll do 30 is because if you do 10 minutes, sometimes if you're debugging and stuff, it's a bit of a nuisance because you'll come back and you have to then wait another 5 to load up. Kind of defeats the point. But 120 minutes, then you're just spending extra money that you don't need to. So we'll terminate after 30 minutes, that's fine. Tags, that's all good. Now for advanced options, you want to enable credential pass-through for user level data access. And as you can see here, when a user runs a command on a cluster with credential pass-through, blah, 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 automatically pass through to Spark, allowing them to access data in Azure Data Lake. So this is so that you can access Azure Data Lake just using your own credentials. So let's create this compute here. So now if we click on this compute, we can see that that's the only one we have here. And the state is currently finding instances. So this could take like 5 minutes. So whilst that's happening, if we click new, we can create a new notebook. And here we go. As you can see, it's just kind of the same thing as Jupyter Notebook, different code blocks, etc. And as you can see here, there's a Python option. In this, you can change the block. So each block could have a different one. So in here, you could have a SQL query. In this one, you could have Markdown, so just a title. And this one, you can then just have Python, etc. Which is really handy if you want to jump back and forward, or if you're more proficient with one than the other. So anyway, we'll just choose Python. If we cut to this notebook here, we can change the name, and we'll change the name of this notebook to Storage Mount. The reason for this is because before we can start to use the data lake storage, we have to mount it to the cluster. So you have to have an access point to the storage. And so as you can see here, I do have a repo with all this, but I do think the best way to learn is to write it yourself. You need to get that muscle memory, but I'm going to copy and paste it. And if you are using a Mac, you can screenshot and then copy and paste from there. So essentially we are configuring this to be mounted. So this is the container we're wanting, which is bronze. And then this would be the container name. So if we go back to portal and go to storage accounts, let's see what it's called, Intex SG. So we'll update this to be Intex SG. And what it means is this will be our mount point. So if we access there, we'll get the data that's in there. So if we click the play button, that will run the cell. We don't want notifications. And now you can see this pops up, start compute resource, question mark. So I'll cancel that, but that's what I was being in. It doesn't automatically run in the notebook. Up here, top right, you can see we can connect a cluster. So we have this cluster. If we click on that, it will now start the cluster. Now this may, again, take a couple of minutes whilst it's starting all of the nodes up that it requires. But now when we run, we have the compute resources to run the notebook. Apparently, I'm not allowed to do it. So I've terminated this because I've found what the other issue is. Because we're in the trial version, we can't use multi-node, we have to use single node. So if we come to compute in the cluster that we created, there's a multi-node and single node option. We want to go single node because multi-node is not allowed for your trial version. So what we can do is click on compute again, we can create compute, and we'll just call it and X single node cluster. So lowercase single node, same as normal. This here, we're going 14.4. Terminate after, and we'll do 30 minutes. Advanced options, enable credential pass through so that you can then mount it. Click create compute, and then let this do its thing. So it's been like 5 minutes and it's still going on. So we'll go to workspace, storage mount, and whilst that's all doing its thing, let's add another code block here. And what we'll do is we'll mount the exact same code except the one change is silver. So our mount point is mount/silver, and then the next one is mount/gold. And again, it's the silver at this Intex SG and then .dfs core windows.net. And these configs here, they're just standard. And if you're wondering where I got them from, it's from this page here. As I told you, Microsoft's always well documented. Access Azure Data Lake storage using Entra ID credential pass-through, which is what we're using just for this example. And if we scroll down, there we go. Azure Data Lake storage Gen 2, and then this is it here. This is the code straight from Microsoft website. Let's try and connect it. So it should be starting that single node cluster now, if that makes any sense. Single node cluster. But we'll let that start, and then when it's done we can run this, and this will just mount them as I had said. Whilst that's working, something which could be good for you to know is that within the notes I've documented a source for another way to do this. So as you could see there, this is legacy, so if we scroll up to the top, which means it's not the way you should do it now. But if we go here, close that down, scroll down, these are just the notes for how to do this whole thing, which you'll be able to find in the repo to help guide you a little bit. If we get to Databricks, we can see there are actually two solutions. So one is mount, and the other is enabling by a bunch of other things, which I can show you this here. So this is another data engineering project that I had done. It's the exact same type of format, just from my own understanding. So the configuration this time is actually using a client and secret ID. Now if you want to find out how to do that, there is another tutorial you can check out, which I'll link in the bottom here, which is Azure End-to-End Tokyo, which is exactly the same as the repo, this one here, and in that he talks about how to do it the other way. So hopefully this will be done by now. No, still going on. Let's see, is it even loaded up? Apparently not. So there's nothing exciting here. You can just trust me. This mounts it, lists it out. We'll show you in a minute. In the meantime, what we're going to do is, if we go into workspace, we have this storage mount, right? And you can see there's create. That's what we had done last time. Instead, what we're going to do is, we're going to import. Well, that's what I'm going to do. You don't have to do it. I would advise, as I said, that you write this all out yourself. But I'm going to import the bronze to silver Jupyter notebook, or IPython notebook. Now if we open this up, we'll see we have two bits we're going to do. We're going to do a single table column transformation. Now this is just to show you how it works, and then after that we're going to do the data transformation for all the tables. So if we start from the top, we have the DB utils FSLS, so listing what's in the mount/bronze/sales LT. So if you recall here, we have this is the bronze container, sales LT, and then these are the tables. So for a specific one, this lists out all of those tables in there. And then we've got another one which lists out what's in silver, which is nothing yet because we've not moved it in. So now we create a data frame where we load in that Parquet format address table. And then we can display that data frame here directly in the notebook by displaying df data frame. And here is the data frame shown as a table. And you can see it's got all the different values here. So this is good for, the display is good for when you make a transformation. So you change the column name, you could then display the data frame and you can see the new name and updated values, etc. That's not the most efficient way to see a new name, but just an example of what you can see with it. So now we're importing these functions here because we're going to use them to change the date format. So as you can see above here, if we scroll along, the date format is hideous, or a nice Scottish way to say it is it's Hackett. It's year and then month, I'm assuming, day, and then time plus seconds plus then what time zone it's in. That's not very nice. If you want to see like a Power BI dashboard, you don't want your dashboard to say along the bottom like that format. You would prefer it probably to say year, month, day. And why year, month, day is because often I've found personally at least that it's the best way to sort, because when you do like day, month, year, if you've done that in a file directory and try and sort it, it goes all over the place. So here what we're going to do is we are getting this, casting it to that, changing it to this format. And here we do a df with column, so we're saying the data frame, get the column with this name, change it to this. And then when we display that data frame, we can scroll along, and there you go, it modifies it to look like that. So that's how to do it for one. We can then also, just a quick example of how to do the SQL. As I'd shown you before, this is dynamic. You can change the language that it leverages, and it does this like percentage and then the language. And as you can see, it's just select one as a column, and then it shows you here. So now we want to do this date transformation for all the tables. So every table which has, or every column within every table which has a date, we want to then change that into this format. So we create an empty table name array, and then for that listing we want to append i.name.split / and then get the first value. And so why is that? Well, for every item that's listed out, you want to get the name, split it by this / and take the first item, 0, the first item in the array. So here, for instance, you're getting each one of these. For the name, you want to split it with this and take this first portion. And that's how you get the names. So now you have a list of table names. What we're wanting to do is do that exact same column change, except this time what we're going to do is for every table we're going to set the path as this mount bronze SLT or sales LT table name / table name.parquet, because that's the format that it exists in here. So that's table name.parquet, and then the one level up is the table name, and one level up sales LT, and then a level up bronze. And for each of that you want to load the data frame in, read it as a Parquet file, and then you want to set a columns variable as all of the columns. So now for each of these columns, if the date word is in the column, or if lowercase d date is in the column, then you want to replace it to not replace the column name, but replace the formatting to this. And then you want to have an output path. We're going to do mount silver sales LT, and then the same format as above. And then we want to write it into Delta. And so this Delta format we're saving it as is built on Parquet, and so it has additional features such as tracking version control and schema changes. And so if we display this new data frame, you can see it's a different table because it will be the table that's the last one in here, so sales order header. And we can see that the modified date is as expected. And so now all of these will exist inside Silver. So I'm going to go back to Workspace. I'm going to go to Storage Mount, and this should be, yep, there we go, that's all good. So let's run all. We're running it wrong, it's in tech, not in text. So there you go, we can see here that in the bronze it has this here. If we done bronze sales LT and run that again, you can see all the different tables, and then this is mounted silver and gold. So now they're mounted into this workspace, and that's why on a different notebook we can then connect that to this same cluster, and then we could just run all from the top, and now it's able to access the data that we mounted in the other notebook. So it shows you just how powerful Databricks is. And so it reads the file, displays it, just making sure that it's all going to run as normal. Updates that. Let's see if it did change it. Yep, perfect. Scroll down, yep, done that, it's fine. And then for all of these, if we just scroll down to the bottom, or we can see it's actually still running this one. Yeah, if we scroll at the bottom, and then we'll be able to see that this gets updated as well. Now the reason the outputs were already here is because I exported this notebook. So there we go, scroll to the end. Looking good. And so if you wanted to export this yourself, you can just File, Export, and then you see IPython Notebook, and that will export it in whichever state this is in. So if these all failed, it would export it with the fail message. If they all succeed, as you can see, it like exports it with all the success messages or outputs, essentially is what it does. So that's bronze to silver done. If we go back here, we'll open up that container. We'll go to silver. If we can see sales LT now exists, let's open that up. And you can see that all these tables exist, and they exist with this stuff here, which is the way that Delta works. So you don't have to concern yourself with that too much. But if we've got gold, we'll see it's still empty. So now that we have this data with the date looking a bit better, I think it would look better still for going to Power BI if we could change these to have an underscore between the names. So due date should be due underscore date, for instance. Now these are very simple transformations. This is not what you would do necessarily if you were in a company or something, but it's just to get you to understand how these transformations work, or how transformation generally works. So I'm going to import silver to gold. Again, you can if you want using the GitHub link below, but I would suggest strongly that you type it out. So we've imported now the silver to gold extended version just because it has the single and the table one, all tables. So we're going to do the exact same kind of thing where we get a single table column transformation. We're going to change the column names, and then we'll do it for all the tables just to show you how it works. However, this time we're going to turn it into a function that we can then just call directly when we do all the tables, just so that we don't have any code reuse. So we'll go through it together step by step. So first of all, let's list out silver sales LT. You can see it's got all of these in it, which is good. Then let's list out gold. Nothing in it. That's good. We don't want anything in there. Now let's read in address as a data frame. So we're getting this table, the delta format. And then if we display it here, we can see that it exists. And it's the silver one, so that's updated. And now we get to the function which does the stuff. The general gist of it here is that it gets a Pascal case and changes it into snake case, which are different types of cases generally for programming languages, for functions and for variable names, etc. So it takes in a data frame, changes the column names and returns the data frame. Now the general gist, you can pause the video here and read the comments which I've generated using ChatGPT so that it's easier for you to understand what's actually going on. But essentially, for every column name, just changes it and just makes sure there's no duplicates. And then it renames the columns using these new column names and returns the data frame. So the example usage here is you would just, because it's returning a data frame, you want to assign it. So you're going to say you want the data frame to be assigned the value of the return value from that function. And you're passing in df, so don't get confused by this. Essentially, this happens, then it gets assigned to this variable. That's why you can use the same variable name. So if we click play here, this will just kind of load up the function, if you will, and then if we play that, it'll assign the data frame the value of that renaming function. And if we display it, we can then see that everything now has an underscore. And as I said, it's a snake case, so it's lowercase underscore lowercase. So now if we scroll down, how are we going to do this for every single table? So it's similar, if not exactly the same, to what we had just done previously. So let's create a temporary table name one. You don't have to do this first two parts, and just to show you what we're doing here. And if we run that, essentially it appends the list item using the file system function in Databricks, and the output that we get is this here. So as you can recall, this is the exact same as our bronze to silver. So now that you know that this exists, right, it's the same thing again. We're going to do the i.name.split to get this address. So let's assign, let's create the variable, and then we'll append to it, and then that will give us, if we run this next cell, address, gives us all the stuff. So next, to do this for all of them, as we had previously mentioned, we're using the function rename columns to snake case. That's this function up here. That's the name of it, as defined there. So let's go back down, and we're just doing the exact same type of thing as bronze to silver, which is for all the tables, run this. And then the output path now is gold instead, and we're still going to do delta format. And if we run that, we can see these paths will pop up just the same as last time. I should have mentioned that's because of the print path that we've added, just so that we can see what's happening. Oops. And that's just all the different jobs that it's doing, because it tries to leverage concurrent computing, hence why it leverages clusters. And so now we have those. If we display this data frame, we can see that it all has underscores, and again it's the very last one, so sales order header, just because that's the last data frame that was assigned in here. And there we go, that's how to do the transformations in Databricks. Now the next thing we're going to do is we want this Databricks, or we want these Databricks notebooks to run automatically from the pipeline. So if we go back to Portal, and we'll go to Data Factory, we'll get our Data Factory up, launch a studio, and from here we'll go to the pipeline that we were creating in the previous episode, which is copy all tables. And so here, what we're wanting to do is create an activity after these have successfully ran to then run the notebook. So in activities here, if we search notebook, you can see there's Synapse and Databricks. So let's drag and drop Databricks notebook, and we'll do again on success of that. It goes to this notebook, and we'll change the name to bronze to silver. Click on Databricks, and then we need to do a linked service again, because it's another service that requires a link. And we'll change this here to linked service. Auto integration runtime, because it is a service within Azure. Subscription, it's our normal subscription that we're using. Our Databricks workspace. And then for cluster, we're going to use an existing cluster that we have. So authentication type, we're going to use an access token, and we'll get this access token from Databricks. So if we go back to Databricks, we'll go up to settings, developer settings, and then access tokens. And so here, set up secure authentication to Databricks API, because we want to give Data Factory a token so that it can then access our Databricks notebook. So let's generate a new token. What is this token for? We'll say Intech Data Eng Project. That's fine. Lifetime 90 days. That's fine. Right. So now it's generated a token. If you don't copy this and get it, it's gone forever. So let's copy it. But it is sensitive information. So what we're going to do? Key vault. So let's go back to Portal. Key vaults. Go to our key vault, secrets, generate our import, and this time we'll do Databricks key, and we'll enter the secret. We'll just Control V, paste it in there, and create. So now that the key has been created, if we go back to Data Factory, we can now click Azure Key Vault, and we'll click our Key Vault. And our secrets will load up, and there we go, Databricks key, Then once that's loaded up, choose from existing clusters. So now that it's got access, it's saying which cluster do you want to use, because we're saying we want to use an existing one. We'll just click our single node, and then we can test that connection. And that's successful, so we'll click create. And then in settings here, it's just going to say which connection, I'm going to use that connection we just created, and which notebook. So if we browse, we'll go to users, we'll go to us, and then within here you can see we have storage mount, bronze to silver, silver to gold. We don't have to do storage mount here since it has been run once, doesn't have to be run again, doesn't have to be run every time. So we can just go straight to bronze to silver, click OK, and that's bronze to silver done. And then we can do the exact same thing for silver to gold. So on success, create, general, change the name. And then we'll change this to the same linked service and settings, browse, and this time we'll select the silver to gold. Click OK. So now we can just publish all, which saves everything. Publish. And so now to test the pipeline, trigger now, click OK. You'll see this comes up in the top. If you click view pipeline run, it will just automatically move you to monitoring. I've missed the boat, so I'll go over here. You can see it's in progress. So if we click on that, and we can see on the bottom here, it's just in progress. Right, now we can see that the ForEach is done. If you click on that preview, so those little glasses, you can see that it just shows this, right? We're not too fussed about this for that point. But now that that's done, we're on to here. So if we refresh, we'll see that bronze to silver is now in progress. And you can see those glasses already whilst it's running. If we click on those glasses, you can see that it takes you to a run page. Now I'm running through this fast so that it gets there before it's done. And you can see that actually this opens up within job runs the current notebook that's being run, and you can watch it run as it goes. So if we scroll down at the bottom, that's already been done. Everything has already happened, but you can see how powerful this is. So that's actually done. So if we go back here and refresh, it'll be on silver to gold. Let's see if we can catch that before it's done. Click on the glasses, page URL, and when this loads up, outputs are here. If we scroll to the bottom, is it done? Oh yeah, it's already done. But as you can see, we can now see from here that it's all successful. We can see who run it, and then IDs, start and end, how long it took, etc. So valuable information there. And we can see run has succeeded. If we refresh, we can see that it's all done. When we have this many running concurrently, you do have an option up here, because we've not run it from debug, but because we've actually triggered it. There's list option, which is this here, but there's also Gantt option, which can be handy, because you can see, for instance, for the ForEach, let's drag this up so you can see, in the ForEach, for the copy data, it tries to do all of them at the same time, and then bronze to silver here. And so that's how to transform data and add it into your pipeline. So we can see here we've created 2 notebooks and added them directly into the pipeline. And now part 4, we're going to load it using Synapse Analytics. So that's our extract, transform, load. And the next episode we'll cover Power BI for a little dashboard and Active Directory, just a little bit on that. So without further ado, let's load the data with Synapse and Azure Portal. So once we're in Azure Portal, let's go to our resource group. And within here we'll see our Synapse workspace. So if we go into the Synapse workspace, you can see under Getting Started, there's an Open Synapse Studio. So if we click Open here, it will then load up Azure Synapse Analytics Studio. And within here, you'll see that it is quite like Data Factory. It's as if it's built on top of Data Factory with a couple of extra features. Now on the left, you see this panel. If we click Expand, you can see Home, Data, Develop, Integrate, Monitor, Manage. So if we go to data, you can see here that you can create databases, so SQL Lake, for example. So you can load the data. In develop, you can see you can create SQL scripts, notebooks, and integrate, so you can create pipelines, linked connections, and monitor. You can monitor various pools and various pipelines. And within manage, you can manage these pools, manage security, triggers, linked services, etc. So you can see here that everything we've done so far, you could probably do in Synapse Analytics. So within data, you want to click plus and you want to make a SQL database. Now here you can see it says select SQL pool type. This is just a pooling of resources. You can either do a serverless, so let Azure manage it relative to your workload, or you can click dedicated, in which you make your own managed pool. The difference here is obviously dedicated is probably going to be more expensive, but its use case is if you have a lot of data, it's probably better to use dedicated, as serverless is only compute, dedicated is compute and storage. But for us, we'll just go with serverless, and then we'll call it GoldDB and click create. I've just done it a minute ago, that's why that error's coming up. And so once it's done, you'll see the workspace here under SQL Database. There's the GoldDB. Now if we go to linked, we can see that Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 is already linked to this Synapse Analytics. And if we open it up by clicking here, you can see that you can browse it as if you're in the storage account. Now there's bronze, silver, gold, and then the Synapse file system. So if we go to gold and open that up, you can see that you can browse this as if you were just browsing it in storage account. What we can do here is on these individual tables, we can right click, new SQL script, and we can run SQL queries in here. So here we just say that it is a Delta format file, click apply, and then it creates the script for us. So if we run that, and then we can see that this pulls back the top 100 rows from that there. So you can see how powerful it is to load the data in this format. We can see here that it's also quite similar to Databricks in that you can connect to different computes, and then you can change which database you're using. So if you had multiple here, you could just select whichever one it is you're wanting to run the query against, and it will run it against that one. So if we wanted to run the same query against, say, bronze, you'd have to go on here, create a SQL database of the bronze, and then just run the query. So let's take this as an example and we'll update it to create a view. And so if we update this part at the top to say create view as, what this will do now is within this GoldDB it will create this view. So if we click run, now once this is run successfully, you'll see that there's no results to show. That's because there's no output, it just creates a view. You can imagine a view like a template of this here. So whenever you select all from this, it will actually show kind of the results of this query. So under workspace, you can see SQL DB, GoldDB. If we refresh this GoldDB, then check under views, we'll see this now exists here, this view. And to run this view, we can do something like this here, select all from that view. And if we run that, you see that it automatically runs that query. Now, to create a view for each of these, we can create a pipeline to do it dynamically. This time, we'll do it in Synapse to show you that we can do it in here, as opposed to going to Data Factory. So if we open up Develop, we'll click plus, and we'll click on Import. And now I'm going to import in here this query, which dynamically does it. I would suggest that you write it out, as I've said in other tutorials, because getting that muscle memory, and also when you're writing out, you make little errors, and then you can you'll spend more time going over it. So you're using the GoldDB, you're creating or altering this procedure, and it has this view name as a parameter, and this is the type. And then within here, it just dynamically runs that same select from blah 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 view name, the same as we had just shown here. So now if we close down this script, and then we click publish all, it will publish this script here, so we'll save it. And the next step is to create a pipeline that uses this procedure. So first of all, let's create a linked service to connect this serverless SQL DB. So if we go to manage and linked services, and then we'll click on plus, and we will type in here Azure SQL, and it will come up Azure SQL Database. Click on that, we'll click continue. Up here we'll rename it to underscore gold. Auto resolve integration runtime because we're using another service within Azure. Account selection method. So let's go to enter manually to show you how to do this. So for the fully qualified domain name in Synapse resources, let's go back to Synapse here. We'll go to settings, properties, and scroll down until you see serverless SQL endpoint. And if we click copy here, then we'll go back, paste that in. And then for the database name, we're using the Gold DB database. Authentication type, we'll change this to System Assigned Managed Identity, which essentially uses your email address authentication to connect to the DB. If we then do test connection, you can see if everything's set up right. Connection successful, perfect. Let's click create and publish all to save that connection. So now we can use this link service to access the stored procedure from the pipeline. So let's go to integrate. There we go, published, perfect. We'll go to plus and we're going to create a new pipeline. Now in here, let's search for metadata. This will get the table names. So here let's change it to get table names. We'll go to settings because something is done here, which is to add a data set. Now there will be no data set, so let's create a new one. In here, let's search for data lake. We'll click on that, continue. Now this time we want it to be a binary, so click continue on that. Binary one is fine. Linked service, we use our new linked service. And then for file path, let's browse. You can see here we can click on gold and then sales LT, and we'll click OK because that's the tables we want. Click OK again. So now you'll see that field list pops up under settings. So if you click new, you can see here there's child items. This gets all the child items under the sales LT folder, which is the one we had just opened in here. Now to see the output, let's just click on debug and it will run this here and give us the output. As we'd seen before, this arrow is the input, and then when it's done, the next one will be the output. There we go. If we click on output, you can see here that the child items are the name and the type. So now we have all of the names of all of the tables that we can use. So now let's create a ForEach activity. So if we come to here, just type in ForEach. We can do that. And then on success, we want this ForEach to run. And within settings, go to items. We'll add dynamic content. So we want to get content dynamically from this tables item. And so from here, we want get table names child items. And we'll click OK. Because as we had seen from the output of that one, if we go back, just click anywhere other than an activity and it'll go to this here. We can check the output again. See, it's called child items, and so that's why in the ForEach we want to get that activity, get its output, and get child items, which is that big chunk of the output. So now we want to create a new activity within the ForEach, so we'll click the pencil icon, and this time we'll search for stored procedure. Because if you recall from last time, in this here, this is a procedure, so you're trying to access the procedures. Now, within settings, linked service, same as last time, SQL, and stored procedure names, you'll see there are none. So I want to click new stored procedure, and as the name, you want it to be view name. Why? Again, because it's coming from here. This is the parameter we want to send in. So that's the stored procedure parameter. The type we're going to have as string. Let's scroll this up so we can see. String. And as the value, we want @item dot name. So let's Click that, dot name. So if you recall from the JSON, it's the dot name value that we want. Now we'll do publish all to save all of these changes. Oh, stored name procedure. We haven't added in the stored procedure name, we just have the parameters. So to connect that, what we have to do is we have to create the stored procedure. So if we come back to this query here and use it on the GoDB, we can run it. That will then create that stored procedure. If we go back to view name and refresh, once it refreshes, we can see that it's popped up now. So that's that dynamic procedure. And then we can pass in this here. So let's publish all to save everything. Publish. And we'll go to the pipeline. Click on metadata. And we will add a trigger now that it's published successfully. We'll trigger it now. Click OK. And then we can see this runs. So let's go and watch it from monitor. Right, so we have a failed. What's failed? Let's see. Click this here, that will show you the error message. Content of directory on path, blah blah blah, cannot be listed. What is this supposed to mean then? So I've just realised that it's this here. Storage account is called Intech SG. And then if we run this, that should be fine. Now let's rerun it by going to monitor, pipeline, click on here, we'll click rerun, entire data pipeline, or failed activity. We'll run from failed activity, so that should just run the ForEach, because this get table names will be correct still. Now if we go to pipeline runs, refresh, succeeded, so let's click on it here, successfully run, blah blah blah. You can see if we click these, as you can now see, it's successfully run all of these stored procedures. So if we go to data, you can go to the SQL database, we'll refresh, and now under views we see all of the views here. Perfect. So something to note here is that this doesn't have to be run every time, because it only has to be run if there are any schema changes, not data, since it's a view, which is essentially like a layer above, so it's kind of like how do you see the data, and the only time that would have to change is if how you view the data changes, i.e. if the schema changes. So that's us now seen all the way up to Synapse. Let's now have a look on our next episode how we can see this data in Power BI. So in episode 1, I show you how to set up your Power BI, because you do need a works email. However, there is a workaround, links in the description of that video on how to do it. Now you can see here as well, app.powerbi.com. If you go on there, you can only change things such as like filters, etc. So you can only interact with dashboards. You can't actually make dashboards from scratch. So for that, you do need the app. And for the app, you do have to have a Windows machine. Now you can try and virtualize it, which is a bit of a nightmare. So honestly, you're probably best to use Tableau if you're gonna not have a Windows machine. But best thing to do is to install it and sign up via the link in that there. So anyway, in Power BI, let's open it up. This will be the home screen, and we want to open up a blank report. Now for this blank report, we need data. So let's go up to the top ribbon and we'll go to get data, and in here we want to select more, and when that loads up, if we search in Azure, you can see there's a variety of sources we can link to. Now what we want to select is Azure Synapse Analytics SQL, because we want to get the data from there. So if we click on that, we'll click connect, and some settings will come up and it will say which server is it and which database is it, which is optional. For us, it's that GoDB database from the previous episode. Oops. But for the server name, if we go back to Chrome, we go to the resource group, we go to Synapse, and it's the same SQL endpoint as last time. So settings, properties, serverless SQL endpoint. Copy. Go back to Power BI, paste that in here, and we'll click OK. And here we want to authenticate with our Microsoft account. So let's sign in. This will pop up and you can just sign in as whichever email you were using for your portal. Click connect. And then this will load the data up. Now as you can see here, it's loading all of the tables. What you can do is you can either load this data or you can transform it. If you transform it, essentially you're creating a series of steps in which the data will always go through whenever it gets updated. So in this example here, if you were to actually transform this data, you could rearrange columns, change types, rename columns, whatever it may be. It can be quite handy. But for us right now, all we'll do is just select all of these tables one by one and load them in. Right, very brief overview of Power BI whilst we're here. Report view, now this is your dashboards view. Table view is a way for you to then view your tables. And model view is where you can then view the data model, which is actually really important and we'll get to in a second. And then lastly, there's DAX query view. So this is where you can write functions to query your data. DAX here being a library of functions and operators. So within Power BI, if we go back to this model here, you can see that it's automatically created a model. Now what it does is it tries to get similar column names, for instance, and say that, oh, this must come from here, that must link to there, such that then if you run queries or filters that it's able to match things together. Right. Now this is important because you can get, say here, address linked to this customer address table. So if you were to filter, say, by city, that you could then get that reflected in your customers. Now it's pretty messy. If you're looking at it here, you can't really see much. One thing to note is that these are your tables and these are the relationships. This is the direction of the relationship, and this is, you know, whether it's one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, whatever it may be. The star indicating many, one being one. So for instance here, in the relationship between a customer and an address, one customer can have one address and one address can have one customer. Now, does that sound about right? Possibly not, because you have multiple customers with the same address if they live at the same place. And so what we can do here is if we go up to the top, we can see manage relationships. That's a much better way to see it. There's the auto detect button, which if we click that, it won't change anything because these are auto detected. There we go. But what we can do then is for that address one, for instance, it's customer address to address. So if we go customer address to address, it's one-to-one. We would probably say that actually, in our case, let's say that that would actually be one-to-many. And then for the cross-filter direction, we can have both. Now this is just, as you can tell, filter direction. So you could do just one way, meaning that if you're filtering here, it reflects there, or vice versa. So we'll click save, and that's fine for us. Another thing to note just before we move on to the next one is that an important concept for data engineering, but we'll not cover it in this because this is more about just using Azure for data engineering, is fact and dimension tables. Fact tables essentially contain quantitative data for analysis, whilst dimension tables contain descriptive attributes which are related to the data in the fact table. And so here's a good example of it here, where the fact table has the foreign keys and then these have the primary keys. So there's different locations. This will just say this item is in this location. Then in the location, here's the contact person, where it actually is, blah, blah, blah. So you'll get the gist. And so that's why these relationships are so important. So now if we go back to our report, let's actually build out a little report. So first of all, let's have a quick look at the UI. So here are all the things that you can drag and drop into your report. So different types of graphs, etc. And then a slicer here, which is a filter. And here is all your data. So if you click open any of these tables, it will show you all the columns within the table with an indicator as to what the key is. So first thing we'll add is a card, which is this here. So we click it, it'll pop open a card here. And we have these two parts here, which are further analysis, which we're not going to use, formatting the visual, and then the visuals here, and the fields that you need for it. So if we click on hours here, and then we can click on field, what we can do is let's add product ID. Drag that into field. And you can see here it's automatically chosen count. Now you can do different ones, so you can do sum for instance, but in this instance that doesn't make any sense. Why would you sum it? Whereas you count it, you can then see count of product ID. What we can do here is switch off that category label. That's that count thing there. Switch that off. We'll go to general and we can turn on a title. And then we can call this number of products. And then you can see the title pops up there. And then you can do all of this stuff here to change what you want it to be. So colors, background color, blah blah blah, which type of heading. So now we have that card. Let's Control C, Control V. And in this one, let's change this here to the sum of sales. So if we X that out, on the left here, let's go to sales order detail. And we can see line total. Let's drag that in. And it says sum of line total. So it's kind of getting the gist as to what it is. And so sum of line total, if we go into the visual, go to general, title, and we could change this here instead to total sales. So we have two cards. We have a number of products card, which we can use this here to change size and stuff. And then we have the total sales card. Do that there. Something like this, just for examples as to what you can see. So now if we open back up the context, so we'll go to business rec. Right, so if we come back to the business request to see what's actually creating this dashboard, let's have a look. So blah 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 dashboard. This dashboard is providing inputs into sales by gender and product category, showing total products, total sales, clear gender split amongst customers, let filter by product category and gender. So we can unhighlight that because that's captured in the below more effectively. Let's use a friendly interface for database queries. So we're showing total, right? So we've done that. Now we want to be able to filter by category and gender, and they want to see actually a clear gender split amongst customers as well. So let's first we'll do a gender split, so we'll have some visualizations going on. So we've got Power BI. Let's pick a donut chart here, and in this donut chart, let's do by, if we go to customer, we can try and infer which gender they are based on their title. So if we click title here, we move that into values, and then another one in details, and what that will do now is that will show us the different titles. So here you can quite clearly say that it would appear based on titles that the likelihood is we have majority male customers, but we have a variety of products. We have 295. So which products? So this is where we could add in our filter. So if we go to slicer, oops, Control Z that, Control Z again, let's click out here, we'll create a slicer. Let's create two of them. So we'll expand this, make it a bit bigger. This is not for to learn how to do any visualization or best practices. This is just so you can see what's happening. So in here, let's do one with title. So we'll drag that into field. Then we'll do another slicer just for sizing. Whoops. We'll Control C and V. Do the same thing, just going to line it up. And in this one, uncheck that. We'll go to product category and we'll go to name. And now we have a variety of product categories. So let's move these two here over. We'll move this title one up here, give it smaller. And then we'll do this and we'll make this categories bigger since there are a load of categories. So now in this visualization, what we could do is we could say, what about breaks? What's our split for breaks? So you can see here that breaks affects here, so there's 2 products for breaks and they total $830 say dollars or pounds. But you can see that it's not affecting this. Now that's because of the importance of the model view. Because if we go back to model view, what we'll see here is that there is no connection between customers and category, I suspect. And so if we come back to these relationships, you can see the customer is all alone, not get a relationship to anything. And that'll be why when you update the customer, it's not affecting this. And when you update this, it's not affecting there. So if we go back to relationships, manage relationships, yours might be different because last time mine looked completely different to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to scrap all of them, and then I'm going to create some new relationships, and you can pause the screen and either check yours looks like this, or yours might work out the box, or you can pause the screen and create them yourself. Right, and there we go. If we click close, go back to the report. So now in here, let's make sure that's back on category. If we click breaks, you can see that that's now reflected in both or all 3 of the products, sales and the chart. And the same up here with title. If we change the title, changes that. So if we say, for instance, let's say, let's scroll, let's just pick something random. Pumps, 2 products, no sales. Panniers, 1 no sales. Locks up, not really selling much, are they? So mountain bikes, there we go. And there's a split here. So we can see that it's 87.5% Mr. title. So 87.5% male gender, likely, because it's inferred. And up here we can change it. So let's say we want to see the total sales products that are bought by Mr. Click that. 150k total sales. So there we go. We've now loaded the data into Power BI and we've created a very simple dashboard. So now that we have the dashboard we want, we can then save this as whatever we want, right? Wherever it is, and it saves it as a Power BI workbook. But we can also share or export it. So if you share it, someone else can then access the file, right? But what we can do is we can export or publish it. So if we export it, we can do it a PDF to send to people, or we can actually publish it to Power BI, and when we publish it, we will then get a link we can follow, which will then send you to this dashboard where you can interact with it. So if you wanted someone to have a copy of it, an interactive copy, you would send them that published share, whereas if you just want them to have a PDF, you can export it. Or if you want to share so they can edit it, you can share as well. Now today we're going to cover how to automate this pipeline so that it works on a schedule. So every day it will get the latest data from the SQL database. And we're going to also cover Azure Active Directory, i.e. Entra ID, so that we can configure different levels of security for the different services, so for different groups and teams. So let's get into it. So let's start with our end-to-end pipeline testing. So we ended last time with our Synapse stuff, right? So let's go back to Portal. We'll go to Home and we'll go to our resource group. And let's get Databricks up, not Databricks, Data Factory, and launch the studio. So let's click on Trigger, New and Edit, and let's create a new trigger. There is one here, but let's create a new one. That one's just from a previous one I had tried. So let's write daily trigger, and I'll just do 2. You can give a description if you want, don't have to. Type schedule, because that's what we're going to do. This is a scheduling one. There's a couple of other ones you can go and look at, but scheduling's the best one because you can do it at time intervals, which is what's most appropriate normally. Now start date, just leave it as that. That's detecting that as being right now. It's saying our time zone is that +1, which is fine. Recurrence, we want this to run once a day, and we want to specify an end date, so we'll just end date it tomorrow. Now when do we want it to be executed? That's what it's asking here. So let's execute it at 17. We'll do 12, that gives it enough time. and we'll click OK and OK again, and then we publish that, and it will publish that trigger on this specific pipeline. Now, also waiting for that to go, if we check this trigger new and edit, you can actually attach or detach triggers. So that daily trigger, you see this here, you can detach it, and that just has trigger 2 on it now. So if I check new and edit, there's just that one, but I can also add on that one as well. So now if we open up SSMS, what we'll also do is open up configuration management to make sure that it's running. Yep, that's still running, which is all good. So now just wait for SSMS to load up. So let's just connect to our standard server, the one we had installed in the first episode. Right, and so now let's open databases. We'll open our AdventureWorks database. We will go to tables. And then let's update product here. If we right click, we'll script table as, and we'll do an insert to. Let's open a new query window. So we're going to insert something in here, so it will change the number of products, because that will be a good way to see it from Power BI. So that's 295, so remember that number. So we have this here, and it gives you a standard that's like, these are the values that you need to add. Link will be in the description to the GitHub where we can find this. I'll just open it with Notepad, and here's an example of how we can use that. Control C. I'll paste these values in here. Product, blah blah blah. That looks good. And so now when we execute this, it will create a new row. So let's execute it once. And there we go. If we do product name me, just for demonstration purposes, product's number also has to be different. There we go. Right, so it's inserted 2 rows, so we should now expect this to go from 295 to 297. So whilst we're then waiting on these changes to happen, because that was much faster than I thought it was going to be, let's now go and have a quick look at Entra ID. So if we come back to the Azure portal, we'll go to the resource group and take RG. Then let's go to IAM. We'll go to role assignments when we're in here. So if you're a company, there'd be multiple people, maybe even many groups of people with access, because people will be leaving and joining teams, etc. And one way you could do this is by assigning each individual person with specific access. So you could add the role and you just add it to the one user, right? But as you can imagine, that's pretty messy, and because of like churn, whether that be from people going from one project to another, or people leaving the company, joining the company, etc., you can imagine just how complicated that can get, especially if people are joining teams. So instead what we can do is we can create a security group, which would be a logical grouping of individuals which require the same level of access, and then we can just assign permissions to that group. So for example here is, instead of just adding access to people to this resource group, we could just say that, you know, the data engineering team can get access to this group. So how we would do that is if we go to Entra ID, previously Active Directory, and we'll go to add, and here we can go to group. Let's make security group is what we want, and this other one is 365 group. The group name, let's just call it Data Engineers. Description will write Data Engineers. And now here under Owners, you would want to select the admin. So in this instance, I am the admin, so I'd select me. And as for the members, as you can see here, we can then select resources, so like it says enterprise applications, as well as people, right? So as you'll see, the only user here is me, the rest are enterprise applications. But if you had a variety of people, you could then find them here individually, under users, or you could find groups of people under groups, and then you've got devices and enterprise applications, or just all of them in here. And so you would select whoever has to be in. We'll just click select and no members, but that's fine. And then we could click create. And so now we've created a security group, which I am the admin of, so I can add people and remove people, etc. And so what that would then mean is if we go now back to the resource group, we can then add someone, so add a role assignment to this group. Now, say you wanted this group to only have access to the storage blob stuff, so within the data lake. So click that, click next, and here, user group or service principal, you would select the members, and here you can see data engineers. So we could click data engineers, select, and now data engineers have the storage blob data contributor. So if we go to review and assign, these members now have that role access to the resources within the group. You can see them here within role assignments, storage blob data contributors, data engineers. So you can see how powerful that would be if you have a variety of teams who need a variety of access to different resource groups, because resource groups wouldn't just be used for like projects. You could logically group things together if you have larger projects. So say, for instance, in this resource group, say we were actually using proper server architecture and we had VNets, etc. If you had a bunch of servers across a variety of virtual nets, you could have a resource group that just holds your virtual nets. So then you could have your networking guys to have access to that. Whereas the applications themselves and the virtual machines, they would have their own grouping. So you can see how powerful this is when you scale it up to teams. So we're still at 705, so 702, sorry. So you know what we're going to do? Let's go and change the trigger. Let's edit this trigger to run 503. Oh, we missed it, didn't we? 504 now. Or wait, actually, what if we do 503 and we'll do like 49? There we go, because that should be soon. Okay, publish. Although I'm a bit worried about the time zone thing because we're on like UTC +1, so it kind of messes everything up. Anyway, let's go to monitor, then we'll see if it works. So 504, still nothing there. So yeah, I think it's because of the time zone thing. Because if you see here, it was detecting me as being at 350, but it's not. So anyway, let's change this. I think it's because of that. UTC +1. So we could do UTC 0, but whatever. Let's just change this then to 4. We'll do 05. See if it can publish at the time. Still late on it. So it turns out that my time zone is messing this up because it's saying it's UTC plus what? Plus 1. What have I done here? But as you can see, it's actually 5:05, whereas that's saying 4:05. But whatever. So what we're going to do is we'll do 4:06 and we'll take it right to the end of this so there's time for it to publish. Click OK, OK, and then that will run. And publish all. Publish. If this publishes in the next 10-15 seconds, it should pick up the trigger. So let's go back to monitor. We'll refresh. And we'll leave it for a minute and then refresh again. Right, 5:07, let's refresh. So our pipeline hasn't run. I think it's because of the time zone differences. Whoops, didn't mean to click debug. Let's go to monitor and we'll cancel that. That won't even pop up, will it? And then if we refresh, we can see that has now been triggered. So if we click on this pipeline name, we can watch it run, refresh, and you can see it just going through everything for ForEach. Right, once that copied data is done, if we refresh, because it's on success, it's all succeeded, it will then move on to the notebooks. And just give it a minute to load up. If we scroll down, we can see that. And as I said before, we'll click the glasses. Oh, it's been so slow, but oh. And now what we're getting here is that we can't monitor the real-time execution because of our timeout on the bronze silver notebook. The notebook is now timed out, and so we're having to wait for those compute resources to spin up before we can then run the notebook. And there we go, after almost 5 minutes, we now have access to the running notebook. To sign in, it'll probably be done by the time we get here. So let's refresh this in the background whilst we're here. And then as before, you can see that all of this notebook's getting run. Looking good. Yep, all looking good. Let's see dates. Yep, perfect. So we'll come back here, and Silver Gold is also done. Nice one, that was fast. Yeah, 36 seconds, perfect. So this pipeline now has automatically been triggered. What we can do is let's go back to Power BI. We can click the refresh button, and that will refresh all of our data, and we should then see this go from 295 to 297. And there you have it, 297, automated pipeline. If you like this video, like it, subscribe for more. If you have any specific requests or comments, queries, as always, leave them in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, because the main point of this was just so that you can understand what do data engineers roughly do on a simple level, and what does a data engineering pipeline entail. So, hope you enjoyed. I'll talk to you later. Till next time, take care.